Good morning. It's good to be with all of you. And what I thought I'd do this morning is just talk a little bit about what's the dirt. I think this concept has finally arrived in the public consciousness when the New York Times does a Sunday spread on soil health. So I want to congratulate all of you who've been doing this work for so many years, that you have brought this to the public consciousness and the potential of soil health to drive many of the outcomes that we're all seeking for. I thought what I'd do is just tell you a little bit about why we care, and then I'm going to take a different twist on this. I want to talk to you about how consumers are looking at this world, because we are a consumer-facing company. We really view this through two lenses. One, if you think about our business model, we take the output of Mother Nature and farming communities, we transform it into products that help consumers get the nutrition that they need in the midst of their busy lives, and we market it to them. And if the front end of that business model, farming communities and Mother Nature, break down, we're in a world of hurt. Either we can't get the ingredients that we need, or they're so expensive that we're serving the top 1%. And we're not interested in that. We've been in business for 150 years. We intend to be in business for another 150 years. And that means paying attention to externalities that affect our business model. And all of you are familiar with what we're seeing in terms of increased demand for the output of Mother Nature and farming communities around the globe, particularly as more and more consumers around the globe move into a middle income class, as well as the decline in the availability of those ecosystem services that provide for these markets and the strength of farming communities. And so we've got to make sure that we're doing our part to make sure that our business runs and that we're contributing to the success of these markets in the future. And that's one of the reasons why we're so interested in soil health. We have come to this only in the last 4 or 5 years, much later than many of you, because of what we see as this being one of the real key levers in the future. And as I've looked at this space just in the last 4 or 5 years, one of the reasons why I think we've seen such an increased visibility around the potential for soil health, and Bill's chart did a great job of outlining all the activity that has happened on the technical and agricultural side. But I really see three things that are driving this. One is just the increased visibility of the science behind soil health. The second is because farmers are really seeing the potential here. And the third is consumers. The science, we're fully bought into the benefits, and we're interested in all the benefits that many of you know so well. Farmers and ranchers are seeing the resilience that soil health brings to their operation and to the value of their land asset. Many of you know that much better than we do. But what we know a little bit about is consumers. And we know that brands are built on trust. And we know that brands, when they lose the trust of the consumer, it actually weakens our business. And one of the ways that we see that happening is that when consumers know that we care about how food is produced, they trust us more. And so we're very interested in continuing to earn their trust every day. It's part of our business model. So I thought I'd just take you through a little bit. I hope you'll indulge me. You might find this interesting about how consumers are thinking about this space. I will caveat all this at the beginning by saying there's no such thing as the consumer. There's 7.3 billion of them on the planet right now. I think there's going to be 10 billion sometime this century, and they're all different. But I'll talk about some generalities to help us think about this space a little bit. Leading edge consumers are deeply engaged in this space. And they think a lot about, where does my food come from, what nutrients are in the food, how was the food grown, how are workers in the supply chain treated. They spend a lot of time and energy, and they tend to be more vocal. But most consumers are much less engaged. The average consumer spends about 4 seconds at the shelf deciding which product to purchase. And while 70% of them will tell you in a survey that they read food labels often, When you actually watch them at the shelf, only about 3% of them actually turn the package and look at the food label. So there's, the average consumer is just less engaged. They're somewhat confused and overwhelmed. They've been let down by brands, whether it's Facebook or Wells Fargo or Volkswagen, the list can go on, and even by science. We tracked studies that were published in the UK in all the major newspapers over a year's period about ingredients that were related to cancer, either prevented or helped to drive cancer in the human population. And there was many studies on both sides of the fence, whether it was about seafood or vegetables or fruits or grains. No wonder the consumer is confused. And that some of them are feeling guilty, aided by social media. If you go on Instagram, there's 300 million photos of food. It's the number one thing consumers take a picture of and post on social media. 300 million photos. You know what the number two is? It only has 57 million. And it's pictures of sunsets. So everybody has an opinion about food. And what's interesting, of course, is when they post pictures of food that are like the one on the left, the great looking meal they had at a restaurant or they prepared for relatives. It's not like the picture on the right. And lest we think we're not guilty, when you have posted a picture of your child, I'm guessing we know which one you chose to post. So consumers are also aided by social media. And guess what? That means everybody has a voice. And we don't get to choose who gets heard. We're seeing this debate play out in our politics right now, are we not? This is just an example of the number of followers that we counted recently on Facebook for various social media entities. So consumers have a lot of information coming to them all at once. The beauty of the information age is you have access to a lot of information. The dark side is you're overwhelmed by information. So consumers are confused and they feel somewhat guilty. And so what do they resort to? They resort to nature as a very simple way of saying and informing their intuition, this is something I can trust. Things that are closer to nature, consumers trust. It is in their intuition and DNA. They believe these foods are healthier, they're better for the world, and they're more trustworthy. And so they look for shortcuts at the shelf. This is one of the reasons why things like organic and non-GMO and grass-fed are growing. It's a natural symbol to the consumer. And they need that because 98% of them are now fairly far removed from the farm in the US. And they're looking for ways to feel closer to where their food is grown. So that's one of the reasons why farmers markets have taken off so well in the United States. It's one of the reasons why brands that actually use farmers in their marketing seem to be doing well. I would argue that it's one of the reasons why organic food is growing, although small, is growing at 3 to 4x the rate of the rest of the food and beverage sector right now. And the desire to connect with nature and where their food is grown isn't just for the elite. There are 3,500 farmer markets around the US and all 50 states that accept SNAP benefits. And so consumers at all income levels are caring about where their food is coming from, and they are using signs of Mother Nature as a symbol, as a way to help guide their intuition when overwhelmed with facts. Interestingly, this isn't just a US phenomenon or a Western world phenomenon. We looked at this globally. This is a survey done by GlobeScan and BBDO. They segmented consumers based on materialism values and social and environmental values. And so the biggest group are what are called aspirationals. These are consumers that want their cake and eat it too. They want really good quality brands, but they also want them to come with social and environmental values. What you see on the right is that countries in the orange actually have a higher percentage of these aspirational consumers. And so interestingly enough, a pretty heavy dose of them in developing economies. And so as we think about global population growth and where consumers are going to start entering more traditional kinds of markets, the developing markets are already tilted toward making sure these benefits and these values are part of their purchases. And when you look at the actual factors that consumers say are important, this is a Hartman study. They do an annual study every 2 years that looks at how consumers think about sustainability in particular. But farming is amongst the most important in their considerations, whether it's animal welfare practices or minimizing pollution in air or how water is being used. These continue to grow in importance to consumers as they're paying attention. I would suggest to you that regenerative agriculture, the potential of agriculture to actually help solve many of our planetary issues, is the next wave of what we're seeing. And many of you have probably followed this discussion. Many of you are probably part of this discussion. The Rodale Institute launched a regenerative organic standard this past year. Savory has developed an environmental outcome verification system as ways to communicate to consumers a different sort of farming practice, a farming practice that we believe really can become outcomes-based, one that actually demonstrates to consumers that farming has the ability to regenerate the planet when done well and when done with really good intention. And we have a brand, an Annie's brand, that has been talking about this. They launched a couple of SKUs that are limited edition SKUs. And we're piloting this in a number of places in our own supply chain, where we're measuring outcomes. We're measuring carbon sequestered in the soil. We're measuring biodiversity on the landscape. And we intend to measure the socioeconomic benefits in the communities, in the farming communities, to be able to truly say that something is regenerative, because we believe that's what consumers want to see when they think about regenerative. So I would just suggest to you that this is kind of the next wave. This is the work is elevating itself. The work that you all are doing is elevating itself and becoming consumer facing and something to pay attention to. So with that, I'll close. We think this is an important space. We're pretty excited about the potential. As you can tell, we're investing in our own supply chain in this. We're participating in a lot of the work that's going on across the industry. We're very happy to participate in the ecosystem services market. We think there's a lot of potential there. And I look forward to talking to many of you later on this morning.